Hi everyone. I think we'll just give everyone a minute or two to join. I think we have a very good showing today.
Hello, good morning. Can you hear me?
Hi,
Good morning, everyone.
good morning, all.
Hello.
Good morning.
Hi, Ulfi.
Good morning, everyone.
Hi, how are you?
Good
Good, good.
morning. Hi, Supreme.
Hi, Supreme.
Hey.
Hi, Ulfi.
Hello.
Okay, I think we can start. Hi everyone. Good afternoon and a warm welcome to today's webinar, Streets for All, Paving the Way for Gender Responsive Non-Motorized Transport in Cities. I'm Ritvika Rajiv, Senior Program Associate at Safety Pin. And on behalf of Women on the Move, we are delighted to have you all here. Before we begin, please note that this session is being recorded, and by continuing to participate, you are providing your consent. A copy of the recording will be shared with you after the session. So today we'll be exploring how walking and cycling are reshaping our cities, making them healthier, more equitable, and climate resilient. So globally, studies have shown that cities that encourage active mobility benefit from reduced emissions, improving air quality, and creating healthier populations. However, forecasts do suggest that by 2050, walking, cycling, and public transport use in urban areas could decline by 40%, leading to a 33% increase in greenhouse gas emissions compared to our current levels. So this makes it more urgent than ever to implement targeted interventions and inclusive policies. So today we'll hear from NMT advocates, urban planners, gender experts, and practitioners who are working to make streets safer, more accessible, and equitable for all. This webinar is being organized by the Women on the Move Asia Network. We were formed in 2021, and we are a network of women across Asia working towards inclusive mobility. And our mission is to enhance the participation, visibility, leadership of women in the transport sector while advocating for a diverse and equitable workforce. Currently, Safety Pin is the Secretariat for Women on the Move, and we are a social impact organization working towards building cities where every woman has a voice. Before we dive into our panel discussion, a few housekeeping rules for today's session. We will be having a panel discussion which will be followed by a Q&A session. So please feel free to drop your questions in the chat box and we'll get to them after the session. And I kindly request all our participants that they remain muted during the session to avoid background noise. So without further ado, I am pleased to introduce our moderator for today's session, Ankita Kapoor. She is a senior program manager at Safety Pin and has a background in architecture and urban planning. Over to you, Ankita.
Thank you. Thank you, Ritvika, for setting the context for the discussion today. It's my pleasure today to moderate this webinar with an amazing lineup of speakers that we have. As cities around the world rethink urban spaces, the role of walking, cycling, and inclusive street design has never been more crucial. Today, we'll explore with our participants how prioritizing gender responsive NMT can create more healthier, more vibrant, and inclusive communities, and also reimagine our streets as spaces for people and not just vehicles. In the next about 40 minutes, we'll hear from our speakers what are some of the gender related barriers in accessing and using non motorized infrastructure, the role of policy level recommendations and strategies in integrating NMT into city planning, and the important role that the community, especially young women, could play in enhancing the use of NMT in cities globally. So, without any further ado, I would like to welcome our first speaker, Melissa Bruntlet. She is an equitable mobility expert from Netherlands. Melissa is the director of Modacity Creative and a leader in advocacy and creative advice for better walking, cycling, and public spaces. With a background in storytelling and engagement, she helps cities design better NMT infrastructure. She's co-author of the book Building the Cycling City and Curbing Traffic. Melissa brings lived experiences from Europe and North America to inspire development of more sustainable and inclusive communities. We welcome you, Melissa. Today, we would like to hear from you a little bit more about what are some of the often overlooked gender barriers in non-motorized transport infrastructure. And how do you think, in your opinion, can cities address these challenges sustainably? We would like to hear from you any of insights from your international experience, any examples of gender responsive planning or frameworks that have shown results. So yeah, over to you, Melissa. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Ankitya, Safety Pin, and Women on the Move for having me. I have some slides to share to help talk about, what I think this means in terms of, what our cities could look like. And let me just start the slideshow. There we go. So when I'm thinking about where cities are overlooking, what cities are overlooking in terms of a gender responsive approach to mobility, it really comes down to this idea of striving for urban vitality. So for me, it's about thinking about it twofold. It's the solutions, which I want to share a few that I've seen around the world, and also importantly, the user groups that we're talking about here. And so first, that really starts with children. I think if we're looking at a gender responsive approach, it's not just for young women, but children in general. The more we can integrate their mobility into our cities, the better. And the cities that I see thriving are the ones that are looking at how can we enable young children moving around with their parents, but also children 8, 9, 10 years of age, to start giving that autonomy back to moving to and from friends' houses, schools, areas of play, because that ability for children to move ensures that carers as well, which are still particularly women, have freedom at the same time. And then also looking at our older adults, as we age, where our ability to drive, we age out of that, or we should be aging out of that in terms of our ability to do so safely. And so walking and cycling are important in terms of ensuring our older adults maintain access to the city, access to the social network of our communities. And, that's not just in terms of smooth paved areas or looking at how we can make sure that cycling can be something they continue to do well into old age, but also areas for sitting, areas for spending time and being a part of community, having social interaction. Similarly, looking at the caregiving side of things, of course, we need to make sure that we're not just thinking about the mobilities of care from the perspective of getting into a car, shuttling family or dependents around and running our daily trips, but how can we do that with walking and cycling? How can we look at that from a networked approach where we connect in a very fine web of destinations and journey origins, all the places that caregivers need to be to make walking and cycling much more efficient, but also enjoyable for them and really suited to their needs. And then again, looking at this even further from the caregiving perspective and looking at abilities, making sure that as we move on this scale from well to unwell and we age or we're able to disabled, that we're not limiting people. And non-motorized transport is key to that in ensuring that people with visual impairments, neurodiversity, and physical impairments still have access to the cities where they live, the communities in which they're thriving, and access to opportunities as well. And of course, that brings me to that connection of non-motorized transport with public transport, whether that's motorized or electric or however it's moving. Because if we're thinking about how non-motorized transport is the response to a lot of the climate-related mobilities that we are impacting, mobilities that exist today, these are very seamless in terms of how they can connect. Walking connected with public transport or cycling connected with public transport and walking really open opportunities for people, particularly low income, who maybe can't afford the extravagance of owning a vehicle, but can afford to combine non-motorized and public transport to access things like work, healthcare, education, just social connectivity as well. And then, of course, that leads to when we create cities that are spaces that allow for urban vitality, which is sort of defined as spaces that allow for a variety of activities at a variety of times of day for a variety of people, and I include a variety of modes, they become much more social. They're quieter spaces. They're spaces where you can interact more intergenerationally as well. And so for me, that's sort of this gender responsive approach is allowing for all of these groups and impacts to thrive, and not necessarily saying we have to do away with the car 100%, but having a space and a place for that, but making sure that more of our places in our cities and our communities are dedicated to urban vitality. So in terms of examples of what that looks like, in the last year and a half, I've been very privileged to be able to travel around for writing our third book coming out in October, looking at the role of women leadership in our cities. And I think that's another thing to think about is where do women play a role in helping these decisions and these opportunities thrive? And of course, one of the cities we looked at was Barcelona with their Superblocks program, which is creating these spaces of urban vitality in former parking lots. And this is the Sant Antoni Superblock in Barcelona. And I think one of the key stories that we heard from this was someone had shared with Jeanette Sanz, one of the counselors responsible for this program, that for her mother, who's 80 years old, or at the time when we spoke to her is 80, her and her friends come down every morning to the Superblock where she lives to enjoy a coffee and spend time together before going on with their day. And formerly, they didn't have this opportunity. And so this is, again, that social space that's created for older adults as well to enjoy space. And then similarly, they have the Beachy Bus program that is teaching young children the idea of how cycling, scooting, walking can get them to school safely. Right now, it is a soft form of protest, and it is guided with volunteers and with police to ensure that there's no conflicts, but it is a growing movement to show that children deserve space on the streets as well. In Tirana, you have the Playground and Child-Friendly Cities initiative happening there, where they're developing playgrounds in pocket areas of the community. When community asks for a space for children, they're willing to build it for them. But what I wanted to point out with this is their newest or their first playground program, was actually designed to be for all ages, ensuring that even teenagers like these young girls, and I understand they're on phones, but they're together, are enjoying a space together. So understanding that teenagers, especially teenage girls, need these kinds of social environments to thrive as well. And additionally, they also have a cycling education program that with traffic gardens like you see here in 2 locations where they're teaching that next generation how to cycle safely, with the hopes that they can start using the burgeoning cycling network, understanding the role that skills development in young children has in terms of that ongoing ability to cycle, but also that unloading of burden on parents to be constantly taking their children from A to B. Some other examples in terms of gender responsive non-motorized transport is the bike share. This is from Vienna in terms of providing child seats. You know, we have these wonderful cities, bike share programs opening up in cities around the world, but not taking into account that sometimes, especially caregivers, will have a child with them. And so having programs like this where child seats are available, this is Vienna. I've seen similar projects in Bogota, in Colombia. I know that there's a program in the UK where they have bikes, both like this and cargo bikes to provide. Here in the Netherlands, we have some cargo bikes as well. So thinking about how can we make shared mobility accessible beyond just one person cycling around. Similarly, thinking about the role of social safety, all of the bike parking here in the Netherlands is designed in a way to reduce dark corners, understanding people need to feel safe when they're coming to these spaces. So again, this is that link of non-motorized transport with the public transport system, but also understanding it won't get used if people don't feel safe in the spaces. One thing I just want to add is a lot of these parking places that are opening up around the Netherlands are also providing things like push chairs. So if you're parking your bike or cargo bike, you at least have something to continue moving a child around. You don't have to worry about lugging it along with you. So thinking about those more gender responsive approaches. In Bogota, they also are providing cycle training for women in lower income communities to give them that freedom to move around, understanding these are women that maybe don't have a vehicle, maybe are a little bit further away from public transport hubs, giving them that skill to be able to access opportunity when formerly they may not have been. In Mexico City, I think much like in Delhi and other cities in India and around the world, they do have women-only areas in their public transport, which I understand is a nuanced argument in terms of how we address social safety for women, but it is until we have more policy level responses to how we deal with fear of and the existence of assault against women when they're in public transport. This is a solution that can help make sure that it remains accessible. And then in Paris, of course, you've got the expansion, rapid expansion of cycling, where you're seeing those numbers shift in terms of how people can move, Parisians can move, but particularly seeing more women on cycles. And now with the rapid expansion there, in speaking with Anne Hidalgo, she has reinforced that this has been a response to women and how to make sure that they have options for transport in a city that's getting increasingly congested and busy, giving them new ways to move. So really, yeah, those are just a few examples. And I think there's a lot of wonderful ones happening around the world that are not just focused on women, but just all the impacts that women might feel in their daily lives, thinking about that in terms of gender responsive approaches. And it's a future that's much more inclusive and accessible. So those are just the slides I had to share. Thanks for listening. Where is the stop button? Okay, sorry. I can't see my mouse anymore, of course. There we go. Okay. But yeah, so that's when I think about that, that's just what I wanted to share is that we need to look beyond just thinking about women, but all the impacts that women feel in their daily lives. And I hope that provided a bit of inspiration. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Melissa, for sharing such wonderful insights and examples. I definitely echo your thoughts. I mean, definitely when we talk about an inclusive city, it's primarily we think of women, but it's also a lot of other people, users in the city, children, the elderly people. So when we talk of NMT, we must ensure that the needs of all the users are taken into consideration. And I think what I also feel is very important, and you mentioned that in your remarks, is also the connection, the close linkage between NMT and public transport. I think if we are able to develop a good NMT infrastructure in our cities, the usage of public transport does also go up. So yeah, thank you so much for your insights. I'd like now to move to our next speaker, Nidhi. Nidhi Madan, she is the Director of Cities and Transport at the Rahagiri Foundation. With over 2 decades of experience in urban planning and design, Nidhi has led some amazing award-winning projects that prioritize accessibility, safety, and sustainability. As director at Samarthyam and the Rahagiri Foundation, her work transforms streetscapes, parks through community-led, nature-based solutions that promote equity and inclusion. Welcome, Nidhi. Nidhi, could you please share with us some of the policy level interventions in your experience that have proven most effective in integrating NMT into city planning, and also a few strategies and your work at Rahagiri and Samarthyam with local stakeholders, local government stakeholders, and how that has kind of contributed to driving systemic change. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ankita. And thank you, Women on the Move and Safety Pin. And Melissa's a hard act to follow, but I'm going to try. So in terms of policy, I would say there are a number of piecemeal policies in place that are headed in the right direction. However, there are no comprehensive ways or means to implement good streetscaping, good NMT at a ground level. And I think that's where a great lack of capacity lies. The focus still tends to be on roads and vehicular improvements. All infrastructure development is oriented towards that. The stress when streetscaping is looked at tends to be on beautification. And therein lies the problem because it ends up being more superficial than serving the functional needs of all the kinds of diversity of users, of different kinds of people from different places, creating spaces for access, for inclusion, for intuitive use. As a result, Rahagiri has been doing car-free Sundays for over a decade, and the need and the visibility of people out on the street, people of all genders, of people from all kinds of walks of life, became an important aspect that needed to be represented on everyday life. So at Rahagiri Foundation in 2020, we took on a project called Janpat to design a model street to showcase all the different diversity of, can you just stop at the first slide? Just start there. The previous one, please. So just to give you a little bit of background, Janpat is a street in Gurgaon. It's a short street. It's a 2.5 kilometer street. Uh, but interestingly enough, it's an industrial area, but also houses corporate offices, homes, marketplaces, as well as a 350,000 population in an urban village called Sir Hall, where a number of the residents are migrants who work in the industry and the offices and the factories around. And this was a street that was probably had every problem that you could think of. There was multimodal conflict because people were walking in the same place. There were cyclists. There were over 20,000 walkers a day, 3,000 cyclists, 11,000 trucks, cars, uh, and waterlogged every year, as well as uh, it was challenging in every way. Over the next many years, working with government, with corporate support, with working with designers, with experts, this street was transformed into a street with segregated pathways for pedestrians and cyclists, with vendor zones, with managing the stormwater management. So as a result of which there isn't any flooding. Uh, it was also designed to be universally accessible. Could you move to the next slide, please? Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. So what we found over 15, stop at the first one, please. 15,000 women, migrant users walk every day. Over 10,000 corporate employees use the street as well. Uh, there was a lot of research done initially to understand the users. Safety Pin also has done audits both before and after its transformation. Uh, the streets are designed to have not just segregated, but very comfortable wide pathways, segregated from the traffic with planted bioswales. Vendors have been allocated spaces. There were over 100 vendors on the street and all in the pathway, outside the pathway, a challenge that typically government always comes out with to not provide pathways because vendors come there. They've been integrated in, all of them have been integrated in the street, so much so that they are now stakeholders. They have taken on managing the area around them, also providing eyes on the street. It is completely, there are no dark spots anymore. It is lit all the way through. It's used more than the usage that we saw earlier, where it was people using it to commute. People are also using it for recreation. Children play here, goats go for a walk. The village, I think if you go to the next slide. Through the design of the street, there were over 100 entries of different levels that were navigated, as a result of which we've still managed to make level pathways, making it universally accessible, comfortable, bollards, seating, lighting, signage as well, next slide, please. So clear sightlines also in terms of the planting that was done along the street and beyond. It not only met metrics of what we're trying to achieve in terms of people using the space, but people also being comfortable to spend time on the place. But we were also able to both reuse waste at the same time. That was reuse waste on the site. We were also able to separate utilities and services and integrate them with help from almost every agency in the government. As a result of which, we look at it as a street that requires little maintenance. And so the possibility of it continuing and being maintained is very high. Next, please. Next slide, please. Oh, so that may be it. So, just to sort of sum up where we are with this project has actually been declared a model street for the state of Haryana as a result of the visibility uh, of what it's been able to achieve. What it also interestingly provides a showcase of all the people and the diversity of people on the street. Before, when it was conflict ridden and people were walking on the street, you didn't see the number of pedestrians, so the need to cater to them didn't exist. As a result of this project, because the visibility of people on the street, people coming to walk, just hang around, spend evenings almost at night. The vendor spaces are full of people just sitting around. People get up from the village and come for a walk at 4:30 in the morning. The children who play, the villages almost embraced it, where subsequent encroachments that are being removed for other parallel projects have been embraced because they understand the value of it. So in just to end with the need for a policy, uh, different policy level integration has happened here in a way that we met a number of sustainable development goals. We've also been able to meet different levels of nature, culture, accessibility, gender diversity, different metrics. But it's also important from a point of view of climate in terms of temperature reduction, AQI reduction, segregation, road safety, and hopefully it's a model of what can be done with very simple measures in many other places as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Nidhi. This obviously is an excellent example of a street redesign project. And like we were discussing, our team is also one of the beneficiaries of the street. And we also, kind of move around this street. So definitely, I think this street kind of really shows that how simple measures, we really don't always need fancy things always, but just being considerate of the fact, understanding who the actual users are and kind of talking to them, taking their perspectives into consideration, and then kind of designing spaces where vendors can coexist efficiently with pedestrians, with other transport modes that are operating and are also needed. I think this definitely is an excellent example. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. I'd like to move to our third speaker, Cyprian. Cyprian is from Kenya, and she is the founder of Women Shaping Cities, an initiative dedicated to building inclusive, gender responsive, and child friendly cities. From leading critical mass Nairobi, which is also a cycling movement, to advising governments and global agencies, Cyprian's work bridges advocacy, policy, and community action. Cyprian, thank you so much for joining us today for the conversation. Could you talk to us a little bit about, in your experience, how community-led planning has helped shift the narrative around cycling in Nairobi? Please share any examples, any partnerships of how grassroots advocacy and sustained engagement with community, especially with the focus on women and other groups, have kind of supported the growth of cycling culture in the city. Yeah, over to you.
Thank you, Ankita, and thank you for the opportunity to share our experience here in Kenya. And I'll be talking mostly from my experience working with Critical Mass Nairobi. So to answer your question, I'd like to preface by sharing our approach, our decision to work with the community wasn't our initial plan, but it's something that came out of necessity. In the beginning, we hoped to work closely with both national government and local government, as well as international organizations. We kept pushing for cycling infrastructure, but that we quickly realized that it wasn't a working strategy. Government agencies didn't believe in what we were advocating for. They would dismiss us, ignore us, or outrightly sideline us from key spaces. And unfortunately, a lot of international organizations also had very rigid frameworks and demands that didn't work for a movement. And the local companies also didn't quite support what we were doing because they didn't believe cycling is an economically viable or a viable industry or something worth investing in. So we took some steps back and looked at what it is that we were advocating for and who we were advocating cycling for, and that was the community. So instead of being strung along or being shut down, we turned to the community and we decided to just build a community of people who believe in cycling. And in defiance, we also wanted to build a legion of soldiers. So once we made that decision to now work closely with the community, we started toying around with some strategies. Nothing was really formal, but there are a few principles that we decided to stick with that have ended up being very successful to the growth of cycling in Kenya. The first thing that we decided that will always be our main principle is being honest with the community. We were very vulnerable with them and shared where we were and what our weaknesses are and the gaps, as well as the frustrations that we are facing, trying to collaborate with different government agencies or international organizations. So being honest with the community was one of the main things that we said we will always do. And the second thing we chose was working with what we had. Being a self-funded movement and trying to do something that was bigger than ourselves, we realized that we had to ensure that our activities are affordable and sustainable. So we limited our activities to what we had. And that in many instances meant borrowing bicycles, looking for venues that are free, working with volunteers. Personally, I was a volunteer with Critical Mass, but for me, it was a decision that I made because I knew what I was doing was bigger than myself and would have a very compounding impact over the years. And the next thing that we also decided that we'll always stick by is being grounded to our values and the principles that we had as an organization. Our choice to put the community first would transcend all the decisions that we would make. And that sometimes meant saying no to certain partnerships that would be beneficial financially, but were not aligning with our principles. And also being inclusive. We made all our events inclusive to anyone, regardless of their economic background or whatever. We just made everyone feel comfortable in all our events. And we also made them free. We wanted people to meet each other, and we also wanted to build this community that is not divided by any traditional lines. And the last thing that we did is to be very protective of the community that we were building. That was internally and externally as well, whether it was from harmful narratives or just internally unsafe behaviors. We are very intentional about protecting the space and the community that we are building. And in retrospect, choosing to go this direction where we are working closely with the community turned out to be the best decision we made, because we were able to plant a seed in many people, a seed that has now germinated into something much bigger and a movement that is unstoppable. So with that growth in numbers, we also started noticing something wonderful. A lot of women started coming to our rides. But unfortunately, we also noted that in as much as the women were coming, they were also dropping off, or just they would stop cycling altogether. And so I asked those women what were their reasons for quitting cycling or just not showing up as often as we would have liked them to. And the responses were very clear, and those are the gender dynamics that initially we didn't pick up on. But a lot of women felt the rides were either too fast or they were too intimidating. And some women didn't feel safe cycling alongside men. And some women were just longing for a community. They wanted something special just for women. And that now led us to coming up with another initiative under Critical Mass Nairobi which we call Kenya Cycling Women. And this space that we now have has been one of the best decisions we've made, because now we have a community that is growing, a community of female cyclists that is growing. We have a very big network. We have WhatsApp groups, and the conversations that are taking place in those groups are very intimate. Some of the topics that are being shared would normally never be shared in other groups that we have that have men. So far, we've organized close to 7 rides, and all the rides are themed rides. We try to make them as enjoyable and exciting and fun, and we give the ladies enough time to take photos and dance. So we realize that in as much as we are advocating for cycling, even in cycling, there are certain nuances that we need to dissect and understand. The way men ride bicycles and the way they experience cycling is also very different from the way women experience cycling. So now that our visibility has grown, the same institutions that previously would dismiss us are now coming back and engaging us. And now we are becoming a voice in the policy discourse, sharing making our demands known. And since we are a much bigger community, it's much harder for even the government to ignore our demands. I believe now we have a few draft policies that transport policies that have taken into consideration cycling as a mode of transport, and also as an avenue for other socioeconomic benefits. Yeah, so we are still growing. Cycling is still growing in Kenya, and even the gender perspective is still growing. But I would say community-led approach has been an advantage to us, because people have a sense of belonging, and now we don't have to fight so much, because everyone else has a voice, and the fight is much easier. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Supreme. And I am personally a big fan of women in transport in Kenya. I was in Kenya last year, and I've been there once before also. And I mean, I was really very happy to see a lot of women be there, like matatu drivers, boda boda drivers. And now that you've spoken so much about women as cyclists, I think that really enforces the community first approach and the sense of belonging that you have been talking about. That once this sense of belonging is there, I think people are together, then it's a unified voice. And it's very easy, and it's much more easier for us, for as a community, as a group, to approach stakeholders and say that this is our city, this belongs to us, and we have equal rights and shares in the city. So thank you so much for sharing the inspiring story of Critical Mass Nairobi. Now I would like to move to our last speaker for this session, Jeza Rodriguez from Philippines. Jeza is a bike commuter, a community organizer, and a bike mechanic from Philippines. She is also a Move as One Coalition Mobility Fellow and Bike School Asia Ambassador. She actively works with local bike shops to promote cycling culture and active transportation, and has been hosting many community events to help people learn cycling, also to repair their bicycles, and help them empower more women. So welcome, Jeza. Could you please share with us some of the challenges that young women in Philippines face while adopting cycling, and how are youth-led and grassroots movements helping to address these barriers? And we'll be happy to hear any success stories on how young voices are reshaping public perceptions around mobility. Yeah, over to you.
Thank you, Ankita. And good day to everyone. I'm Jeza Rodriguez. I'm from the Philippines. And I'm very fortunate and I'm very happy to be here sharing our stories as well in the Philippines. So as Ankita mentioned, I've been a bike commuter since 2017. The reason why I decided to use my bicycle as a form of transportation is I want to move around quickly. I want to skip the long lines and traffic, and I also want to save up, because apparently in the Philippines, you really need to save up. You really need a lot of money to be able to move around. And then, so since 2017, I didn't change my form of transportation. I've been changing my jobs, but bicycle has been with me since then. And in 2022, I found this curiosity or this passion of learning how to fix my own bike, because I'm always on my bike. I figured that I would want to be able to fix my own bike whenever and wherever I am. So I decided to volunteer to bike shops and learn how to fix my own bike, specifically on disassembling and assembling my wheels, patch my inner tube, and also to bring back the loose chain. And aside from learning that additional skill in bike commuting, I also have my experience in community organizing. So I figured if I want to be able to, enjoy and encourage more people to use a bicycle, I would want to organize community events. So at first, I just started organizing my friends. I organized like a 10 people community ride to a flower market, and then we went to the picnic to the university, and I taught them how to repair an inner tube. So later on, people have been seeing my post about this bike repair lessons, and then they've been asking me to also teach them, because apparently we don't have like a formal or even an informal organization that does that as of the moment. So in 2024, I wrote a proposal under the Move as One Coalition. It specifically caters to a bike repair lesson for women. And we were only expecting for 10 participants, but when we posted the registration form, it actually blew up because we got hundreds of participants wanting to learn how to repair a bicycle. So these are some of the photos that we've got from the events. And later on, I've been partnering with brands like Decathlon to be able to reach more people and even their customers on how to repair bikes, and later on learn how to ride a bike. So just a preface, in the Philippines, according to a recent study, we actually need 25 minutes to complete a 10-kilometer trip. And if you're using a bicycle, you only need about 15. Well, if you're like me, who's been using bicycle as a form of transportation for 8 years, it will take you 15 minutes. And this doesn't only cost us time, it also costs us money. So for now, we only have one company who monopolizes the private form of transportation, which is Grab. And of course, the issue on mass transportation, we don't have enough trains. We also don't have enough buses. So bicycle is really one of the solutions that we're thinking to move people around, especially the young people. So yeah, I've been running workshops since last year, and we're happy that from these conversations, we were able to gather stories of the barriers why young women or people from the Philippines didn't choose a bicycle as a form of transportation. So in terms of unique challenges in the Philippines, I've identified three. The first one would be, of course, the lack of infrastructure. As you can see in my presentation, this is how we bike in our roads. Some parts of our city has protected bike lanes or a two-way bike lane, but what we're saying is that because there's not much monitoring, sometimes car users or motorized vehicles even use our bike lane. So we're fortunate that we have young people, and later on I will show you more about our efforts to make sure that our bike lanes are protected and monitored. So in the middle of in the presentation, you can also see that the people who participated in my workshop have been struggling how to cross the intersection, because as you can see, it doesn't have proper markings on where people are going to bike in the middle of the road. And there's actually a study in 2022 by a non-government organization called Institute for Climate and Sustainable Cities. They launched a Mobility Awards, a project that includes a component for tracking bicycle usage across the country. And one of the key findings from their data was a decline in the number of female cyclists, dropping from 4% in 2023 to 3% in 2024. So there's really work to do here in the Philippines. And according to the report, this decrease is attributed to three main factors. The first one is increased use of public transportation. So the female cyclists who've been biking during the pandemic probably chose public transportation now. It's probably also because of the lack of infrastructure. And two is the unsafe road conditions. As you can see, we don't have clear protected bike lanes as of now. And the third one would be the adverse weather conditions. So it can be really hot here in the Philippines, and sometimes we also have a lot of typhoons coming in. And as a bike commuter for 8 years, I'd say that the lack of cycling infrastructures, lack of bike lanes, bike parkings, and end of facilities is really a huge barrier for women to choose cycling as a form of transportation. The second one would be, I think, psychological and cultural. And this opinion came from the conversations that I've had with my students from the workshops, that if you're a parent, you wouldn't allow your kid to bike outside because, as you can see, majority of the road users right now are motorized vehicles. So if I have, like, say, 10-year-old kid, I wouldn't allow them. So let alone unfortunately a woman who's vulnerable also with sexual harassment outside. But we're also proud that Philippines also has a lot of safety measures in making sure that women are safe outside. So we have Safe Spaces Act, and we also have a lot of progressive laws, but again, the implementation is another discussion. So yeah, you can see that there's also a cultural thing here that you can only be considered a successful person if you have a car. So I think there's a lot of work that we need to do, in not only in terms of capacitating people and creating infrastructure, but also on the cultural level of changing people's perception about owning a car. And the third one would be in terms of bicycle industry as a male dominated industry. So what we've knowing that the data is saying that female participation in cycling is declining, what I personally do, and the Bike School Asia where I studied, is we're teaching people how to repair their own bikes. And we've seen and we've been hearing conversations from our students that for them that attending our workshops really help them build confidence in riding a bike, in getting to know that, having that confidence that even if they go somewhere, they have the capacity to repair their own bikes. And yeah, and in terms of highlights, in terms of success stories that we've seen so far in advocating active transportation is, just yesterday we had a workshop with one of the academic institutions in the Philippines, and we were so surprised that we had 10 years old interesting to learn how to repair their own bike. So we see that even if there's a lot of problems that we have in the country, there's also a lot of hopeful and interesting stories that we will always look in and proudly sharing it to the world, that young people in the Philippines are doing a lot. We're shaping our city, and we're helping change the conversation. And I think this is the last slide that I'd like to share. We have been attending conversations with the local government units. So we have this direct channel with our local government offices, that if the bike lane is occupied by a motorized vehicle, we can just send our updates and they will respond immediately. And we also partake in shaping the bike to school programs, how policies are being shaped through Move as One Coalition and Make It Safer movement. So we've been creating creative protests as well, and we've been highlighting how important it is to move people and not cars. So I guess that's all for us, and we hope that we can contribute in making sure that people chooses active transportation through continuous education. in terms of bicycle education. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeza. This was really very, very inspiring. I mean, to see, I mean, first of all, congratulations to you for all the commendable work that you've been doing on this front. And also, like you said, I think it's not only in Philippines, but I think in a lot of countries across the world, one thing is to, get more people to cycle, but building that confidence in people that you will be okay if something falls. I mean, if there's if something happens, you will be in control. You have the capacity to repair your own bicycle and move forward, and you can still be an active citizen, an active street user is very empowering. So thank you very much. Uh, as we come to the end of this session, I'd like to once again thank all of our speakers for such a rich and thought-provoking discussion. I think one thing that I would like to kind of really highlight that has come out strongly is that definitely we need to ensure that our streets are designed considering everybody in mind. It's not just women or one user group, but we have to make sure that everyone is taken into account. And it's clear that NMT is not just a mobility solution, it's a catalyst for better public health, lower emissions, and stronger and more connected communities. I think streets must be safe, accessible, and welcoming for everyone, especially women, children, and the elderly. And like Jaza mentioned, I think skill training, particularly for women in using and maintaining bicycles, isn't just practical but very empowering. When we give people these tools and confidence to move freely and safely, we really unlock access, agency, and the opportunity. So as we move forward, let's just remember that the real change will start with people. It's already started with people. So we need to just continuously keep listening to the communities, keep going back to them, listen to them, and kind of put those voices across to the decision makers. So creating safe streets for people should not just be a policy goal, but a collective effort, and each one of us has a role to play in advocating for safe and inclusive streets. Thank you once again to all the speakers. I'd like to give the floor back to Ritika to facilitate the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thanks, Ankita. So we've come to the end of the session, and there was such beautiful, wonderful work that we have seen. So if anyone would have questions, you can raise your hand and we'll come to you, or you can drop your questions in the chat box. You can also indicate which of the panelists you would like to address your question to. So the floor is open for questions now. I can see a lot of commendations happening in the chat box as well, which is great. Yes, Celine, you can unmute yourself here.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry I will not be able to switch on my camera, but this is a question to all the presenters. If you have a sense or a dimension of how your work is impacting, or does it reach out to the urban poor people in your communities, in your cities? Does it reach out to the urban poor communities, whether in Philippines, Bogota, Colombia? Is there any reach out there? Or do you see them participating, or do you have plans to include them? Or how does the city see their participation in this transport, the alternative form of transport? Thank you.
Maybe I can add. Yeah, so we recently had a workshop with an NGO that focuses on women's reproductive health, and they've been telling us that this types of bike education is really needed in the grassroots community. While we don't have yet the infrastructure, maybe we can create a community where we have more people signaling a demand of having a cycling infrastructure in their own area. So while the people who are expert in policy making are doing their best to lobby for an infrastructure in a specific area, community leaders or organizers like us can actually create programs that can enable and can remove the barrier to enter in the active transportation and choosing bicycle as a form of transportation.
Supreme, I think you have something to add as well.
Yeah, I can share our inclusionary strategy. So Critical Mass Nairobi organizes rides every last Saturday of every month. And what we decided we will do is we will make sure that the rides go to all the neighborhoods in Nairobi. So we don't repeat the same neighborhoods. Sometimes that meant going to even the slum communities and riding bicycles in those slum communities and having them have the people living in those communities see people on bicycles. And many times they would run home, those who had bicycles would run home and get their own bicycles and join us. And it has honestly worked very well because they can clearly see other people who look like them riding bicycles and just they get inspired and start cycling. And from that, we also have seen smaller cycling groups popping up in different communities, whether it's the more affluent neighborhoods or now the middle class or slum communities. We've had several cycling groups coming up, and they all then now come to critical mass as a group because we've created this wonderful sense of community and belonging where they also get a chance to talk and socialize with other people. So that's one of the strategies that we adopted.
Thanks, Cyprian. Melissa?
Yeah, I wanted to add, so the example I gave from Bogota, those initiatives are actually taking place in lower income communities. So the civic government has set out to create these care blocks where they're providing services in particular for women who have struggled to enter the workforce or are coming into it late, to provide those training skills. So cycling is just one of the things that they're offering, but they're also offering like working skills training to rejoin the workforce, and to on the transport side also start working as transport operators and within the administration. So they're actually reaching directly out to the communities where there's the most need, and also locating these care blocks near mobility hubs to ensure that there's that link with public transport. And then the other thing I just wanted to add to that's one example. There are loads around the world where they're taking into account not just the most affluent, but the most in need and most underserved in our communities. But my role, I find often in this space, and the role I'm happy to take is as a storyteller. And I think that's an important side of it, is to share the stories that are of impact, that are not just for the people that have, but those that have not, to show that it is something that is for everyone. And so I would say that those of us working in this space, it's about communicating the benefits, as well as all of the wonderful work done by Jessa and Cyprian and Nidhi, making sure those stories are getting out so that people know that this is happening and it's not just for one group of people, but it is meant for everyone. And so I'm happy to play that role and to be able to share those stories. And anyone that works in this space where they are a communicator, I encourage you to do the same.
Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you. Thank you all for your excellent presentations.
I think we have a question in the chat box. We have Malinti. She says, thank you for all your amazing presentations. This is a question for all the presenters. In addition to cycling, walking is also an important mode of transport for many women. How can we work on improving the walking experience of women? Perhaps, Nidhi, you can start out.
You might want to ask second question as well so that people can answer a little bit of both. Yeah.
Sure, Kalpana. We have Lakshya who says, I was curious about how do we address the increasing heat in our cities where sometimes it is impossible to cycle. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think just following up with what the speakers earlier said as well, we sometimes don't take into account most women actually walk to work for small trips, for other things. So both cycling and walking become almost parallelly important. It also gives, and I'll address the heat one as well. So the project that we did, it actually started to save 700 trees, because those were going to be cut to make a 6-lane road. And the idea was to keep the trees so you have the shade, so you have a comfortable walking experience all the way through. One thing that we don't take into account, maybe because the underprivileged don't have the voice to say so, but the dignity of having a safe space and the equity that you have, that you're not walking through waterlogged streets, you're not walking in traffic, you have a safe space. Melissa showed a photograph of women on the cell phone. I've noticed one thing, that when people have accessible spaces, you're almost walking on your phone. But the fact that you can do it as a safe space, as an accessible space, as a space where you don't have to worry, that's a huge it's a huge thing that it's important to keep in mind, because there are lots of people who won't say it, but the experience that you see them have is very different.
Would any of the other panelists also like to take the next question, perhaps, and then we can wrap up?
I can just, sorry, Sabrina, I saw you unmute as well. I'll just quickly add to what Nidhi said. I think the greening, the more and more cities are looking at this greening aspect of their cities, keeping trees or planting them and thinking about shade. And I think that's one of the key aspects to addressing the heat. I mean, we're not going to change the climate overnight, but the more that we can address heat island through absorption, reducing the amount of hard spaces and increasing soft spaces will be definitely part of that. And thank you, Nidhi, for making that point about being able to walk while looking at a cell phone and not being concerned about your space. It's obviously we would love people to enjoy the world around them, but I think that's an important point, is if you feel comfortable enough to do that, then that space has been made safe for you.
I think I'm going to answer the question on heat islands. So in many African countries, and I think even in Asia, transport is a very fragmented sector, and as much as it cuts across, health, sports, education. Let me come back to Kenya. In as much as transport cuts across all the sectors, you find the way the system is designed, it's only limited to the carriageway. We don't look at the value of trees, for example. So the environmental department does not consult the transport department. The education department does not consult the transport department. Urban planners do not work together with engineers. So there needs to be harmony and close collaboration between all the sectors that are affected by the lack of a footpath or a greened footpath. There was another question that Malindi had asked about pedestrians. So once amongst the many strategies, but one strategy we took whenever we advocate for cycling was to not limit ourselves to cycling only. We always champion for walking and cycling, so non-motorized transport. A few years back, we challenged the government by reviewing the existing Transport Act, and we submitted an amendment to the Transport Act, and that act was supposed to include walking and cycling as a priority in any new roads that are being constructed in Kenya. And right now it is in Parliament, and we are we're still waiting to hear what will happen. But our strategy with cycling is, we know we don't have a lot of advocates for pedestrians. In fact, maybe we are one of the few. We don't have so many champions for pedestrians or walkers. So we took it upon ourselves to also include pedestrians in our advocacy materials, especially when it comes to policies, because they go hand in hand. We cannot talk about cycling and forget walking.
Thank you so much, Supreme. I think we can take just one more question if anybody has one, and then we can just quickly wrap up. So yes, in the chat we have Amardeep Singh. We have government-initiated public bicycle sharing systems in place. Local governments are not properly implementing it. How do you think we can create advocacy?
There's also a question, I think, from Dr. Mishra. He's been raising his hand. Please go ahead, yeah.
I can maybe answer on the question of advocacy from Amar. So what we have here, I think, in terms of my observation, having cycling groups in academic institutions and organizing frequent bike rides and having conversations about the issue on traffic, how can we support it, how can we support the initiatives surrounding to solve it. I think it creates one education on the people who are using the roads every day. So these are the students, these are the teachers. So I think you can talk to the local government unit and maybe coordinate like a bike ride if you already have a bicycle in place in your local government institution. You can borrow it and use it as a say you can use the bicycle to teach other people as well. So just maximizing what the community already has. You don't need to purchase anything. Just need to connect the people who are already in power, who makes decision, and who has the material. And you can even collaborate with brands. For me, I just ask, say for example, Decathlon, if they're interested to support my bike mechanic lesson with active transportation officers, and they said, yeah, we are down to help you train these people, because I think it's about finding the alignment of company values. If they're supporting active transportation and you have the influence and the network, then definitely the engagement or the partnership would be wonderful. So you just maybe have to start a conversation today.
Thanks, Jessa. Dr. Mishra, did you have a question? I think you're muted.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Kalpana ji. I must compliment Safety Pin also for organizing this excellent interaction. I don't have any question with any of the presenters, but on the basis of my own handling of women's safety issues as a police officer and other things, what I feel that these are all reactive interventions which are being carried out by such initiatives, in whether it is in Kenya or whether it is in any other place where there is already a urban mess. I think the unplanned urbanization and unplanned urban growth has created so much problem. That is what we are facing. I personally feel that we need to have a lot of proactive measures at the planning level only, which is actually lacking many places. We have very few planned cities in India also. I know I was in Chandigarh. Chandigarh had a dedicated cycle lane. Now, where such kind of things are not part of the infrastructural design at the initial stage, then your task to make a space for cycling, or for that reason other kinds of gender inclusive initiatives which have a bearing on safety, really becomes a very Herculean task. Gurgaon also has done, but they had to, again, because it was very close to in a village where they were able to prevail in community. But the most commendable job is by Kenya, where they were fighting against their own system, and the system later on realized, because it was a community initiative, and community needs that. So that's observation, that's a feeling just I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mishra. And I think we'll take just one last question from the chat box. It's from Ria from InHave. She says, in my research across Ahmedabad, I've noticed that everyday cyclist commuters are mostly people about 35 from economically weaker sections, while younger people, even from the same background, aspire to own motorized vehicles, often taking loans and working part-time as delivery riders. What strategies or cultural shifts do you think can inspire and encourage more young people to choose cycling as a primary mode of commute? Any thoughts are welcome.
Can I answer that?
Sure.
So in Nairobi, that was we had the same reality back a few years back, say 2016, 17. We didn't have a lot of middle class to upper middle class people cycling. So we decided to try and address that by making cycling cool and interesting. So we package cycling into something that anyone would want to partake, and also feel bad for missing out. So I think it's just how you package the mode of transport. I know in the global south, owning a car is still perceived as, a sign of prestige and success. And it's something that we are also trying to tackle. We want to show young people and even people who are, in their 60s and above, that owning a car is not as prestigious as we think, because we still end up getting stuck in traffic and spending a lot of money and valuable time in traffic. So making cycling cool, just the same way as vehicle companies spend a lot of money on advertising to make owning a car cool and exciting. I think those of us who are champions of cycling also have to find ways of making cycling something that somebody wants to partake in. But if we continue just looking at packaging cycling as a way of commuting, we might miss out on getting the attention of young people. Young people like cool things.
Yeah, I can maybe chime in on what Cyprin mentioned. So I read this book about pleasure activism and joyful militancy a few years ago, and it has inspired the work that I do in community organizing. The idea is you find what you're doing already. For me, it's biking, and you fuse that with an idea that the community needs. So I then organized a community ride a community ride and a discussion about pleasure and consent. So after having a community ride to the flower market, we went to the university and we placed our flowers and the picnics, and then someone expert on the pleasure and consent discussion had that conversation with the cyclists that who attended the event. So it's about bridging something that the community already does, which is cycling, and something that also the community needs to know. Say, for example, election campaigns, the need for safe pedestrians or sidewalks. So the idea is really, the formula is just biking and something that the community needs. So just find an expert that can fill that gap and make sure that you also document the event, because people like to be photographed and they want to share it on their social media and use it as a hashtag. And if you want to really reach young people, you need some cool photos. So just look for the photographers in the community and invite them in your event.
Thank you so much, Jessa, and thank you so much to all our wonderful speakers. Um, Am I seeing more questions come in? No, that is a reflection, I think. But it was a great discussion, and I think we have a lot more to discuss further. And I think maybe perhaps in future webinars we can do so. So now I think we can now wind up today, and I'd like to hand the floor to Dr. Kalpana Vishwanath for the closing remarks. Dr. Kalpana is the co-founder and CEO of Safety Pin. Kalpana?
Thank you. Thank you. No, I don't really want to give any major closing remarks. I think it was an excellent discussion. I think it's interesting, the issue of walking and cycling. While the infrastructure needed for both is similar in a way, I think they represent two very different things. I think we all walk. And it is true, I think Ria or someone had talked about, at least in India, and I suspect in many other countries, it is the economically weaker sections who have traditionally walked and used cycles. And similarly with women. So in India and globally, women use public transport and walk more than using private transport. So I think when we talk about making cycling, more appealing, we need to recognize that there is a large percentage of people who already cycle and walk. But the problem is, and I think Nidhi and others have spoken, is the issue of safety. Road safety as well as safety from sexual harassment and other things. And I think there is where the difference is. So women walk a lot and use public transport. Women do not necessarily bicycle. And I think that is the interesting difference, because bicycling has a different, there are many cultural connotations to bicycling. And while safety is a big one, I think, and both road safety and many people we know in our country that cyclists are among the most vulnerable street users. So most of the deaths that occur, a large percentage of them are cyclists and two-wheelers. Nevertheless, cycling somehow holds I think, a sense of empowerment, a sense of freedom for women when you can start cycling. And even as I think more than 150 years ago, the suffragist Susan B. Anthony, she said, let me tell you what I think of bicycling. I think it has done more to emancipate women than anything else in the world. It gives women a feeling of freedom and self-reliance. I stand and rejoice every time I see a woman on the wheel, a picture of free, untrammeled womanhood. I think bicycling is something there's also a gender dimension to bicycling, that women do not bicycle as much as men, and I think there is a sense of freedom, and therefore I'd like to end on that, because Jeza spoke about, what was it? I think active resistance or something fun, very cool like that, the word. So I think the point is that our cities are also places that we we are living in every day, and cities, urban areas, rural areas. And as Nidhi showed, when you provide good public spaces, people use it even for leisure, for socializing. And I think that is the kind of change that we need in our cities to address the needs of really the most vulnerable at the one level, and on the other hand, to get car users off their cars, because the streets are not going to become safe unless we reduce the number of cars. So thank you again, everyone, for this really exciting seminar, webinar, and discussions. We will continue these conversations, and I think everyone who's written in, we will share the contacts of everybody, so you can be in touch with people as you would like to learn more about the experience in different countries. And thank you to Women on the Move for being sort of organizing this. Cyprian, Jeza, Nidhi, and Melissa, I think you brought in such a different perspective. At the same time, at the core of it, it was saying the same thing in a sense of how it is liberating, and how it is centrally important to cities to become more friendly for walking and bicycling. So thank you very much. And it is a testament to all the speakers that more than 50 people have stayed 17 minutes beyond what they were supposed to. So thank you so much, and hope you have a very nice day.
Thank you.